We've got the numbers. U.S. economy adding 275,000 jobs in February, above the expectations of 198,000. The unemployment rate rose to 3.9%, above the expectations of 3.7%. So this is interesting. The jobs numbers exceeded expectations, but unemployment rate went up. Why would that be? More people getting in or back in to the labor market looking for work. Because that's why you look at the unemployment rate, and it has been historically low, but it's also been artificially low because people have been driven to the sidelines, whether it's because of, government programs or anything else. But they're now getting back into the job market. So that's sending unemployment numbers up, despite the fact that the U.S. economy is adding more jobs than it expected to add. But Bloomberg, just reporting here in the last few minutes, Chris Ansey, a senior editor with Bloomberg, reports here in part, and I'm reading this all in real time. The last 2 months were revised down.
Talk about a bombshell.
So, like what seems to happen every month now.
You don't say.
We get a number for the month, and it exceeds expectations. And then buried in the data, the previous months get reported downward. Where it's like, oh, yeah, the numbers here were really good for this month, but last month we're revising down. That's exactly what is going on here. And that's something that is being reported by Bloomberg this morning. That, yes, the numbers exceeded expectations. However, the numbers for the previous 2 months were revised down 167,000 jobs. Now, job growth for this past month was led by education, healthcare, leisure, and the government. So once again, you are seeing the healthcare industry, which is totally out of whack, and the government being two of the leading job sectors of growth in this country, education as well. I mean, in many ways, education, healthcare, and the government are all basically government jobs now at this point in large part. Sad to say.
Mm-hmm. Exceeding expectations just mean your goalposts have wheels. Basically, right? I mean, what are you really saying?
Yeah.
We didn't expect the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah.
They exceeded our expectations.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what you're thinking. I mean, that's all subjective, right?
It is. Yeah. It is.
So it's easy to exceed expectations, really.
Yeah, it is. No doubt about it. So the Dow futures. Yeah, then they don't. Then they don't. Once the numbers come out the following month, they don't. They revise them down. The market has not really reacted to this morning in any meaningful way. The Dow futures are off 37 points. That's, more or less meaningless. It's basically even as we get set for a Friday trading day coming up in 50 minutes or so. So nothing really huge to react to right now on this. Joe can spin this positively, obviously, but it doesn't change the fact that the guy clearly doesn't feel good about his own economy. Because if he felt good about his own economy, he would not have waited 35 minutes in last night's State of the Union to talk about the economy. Literally 30. He waited. It was like 9:56. I have all my timestamps written down here to cut the audio this morning for the show. He waited 30 plus minutes into a State of the Union last night before we got anything on the economy, which is always basically the number one issue going into an election year. And eventually, this is what we got.
Where is it written we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world? We are, we will.
Why are you yelling at me?
More people have health insurance today. More people have health insurance today than ever before. The racial wealth gap is as small as it's been in 20 years. Wages keep going up. Inflation keeps coming down. Inflation has dropped from 9% to 3%, the lowest in the world, and tending lower.
Health insurance, more people have it. Okay. For those of you in the private sector, have you checked into what your health insurance is costing you? Have you looked at that lately? Just take a look. I mean, it's not good, and it's not the fault of your employer, by the way. They're taking on a larger burden of health insurance costs, and so are you. I mean, that's what we're experiencing here, and I don't blame the employer for that. It's the industry that is so out of whack. And I remember a time going back, 10, 15 years when we were promised this great new health insurance. It was called Obamacare. And we were all going to be living high in the hog, and insurance rates were going to come down, and everybody was going to be doing great. Everyone was going to be covered. And if you look at health insurance costs over the last decade, they have done nothing but skyrocket in one direction. That's what you've seen. Meantime, the president also noted the racial wealth gap. Well, I don't know where he's getting his numbers, because I'm reading this here from the Brookings Institute, and it shows, according to the latest data from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the nation's racial wealth gap increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. And by the way, this article is from January 9th of this year. It says here, even though wealth increased across the board, the data discussed here shows that not all people are reaping the benefits. While housing equity increased for black households, other components to wealth building, such as corporate and business equity, did not, exacerbating the racial wealth gap. Wealth increases during the pandemic did not narrow the persistent racial wealth gap. So where are these numbers coming from? I mean, you can get up there to the podium last night at the Capitol and scream about it, and you can yell and stop yelling at me, but stop yelling at me. It's like the old radio adage. Some guys are always yelling. Don't yell at me. Just talk. Just be conversational, like you're sitting at the bar talking to a buddy. That's how I like to be spoken to, and that's how most people like to be spoken to. You don't need to yell to be passionate. And as Joe Biden's gotten older, he has really struggled with that idea. You can be wildly passionate about what you're saying, with your voice inflection, with your cadence, with your pacing, and not yell at me. Stop yelling. It takes a little nuance, takes a little bit of thought, but it's not hard. And instead, he's telling you all these things about the economy that just simply are not what the American people are feeling right now. I mean, I don't have to go to poll after poll after poll, but I'll go to one right here. And this comes from CBS just 2 days ago. And right now, people are looking back at the economy under the previous guy, and they're realizing, gosh, things were actually pretty good back then. I may not have liked them, but the numbers are the numbers. All right, here's the poll from CBS. 65% of Americans remember the economy under Donald Trump as being good. Right now, 38% are giving the current economy under Joe Biden the same positive assessment. Ask yourself why that might be. Even though people are fully employed, even though, yes, they have jobs, do they feel like their dollar with that job is stretching as far as it did 4 or 5 years ago? The answer is a resounding no. Interest rates continue to, remain stubbornly high. Housing costs, forget it, are to the roof. Grocery prices up 20% the last 3-4 years. People are not feeling it. They're not saving for retirement like they want to be saving for retirement. Now, if you're approaching retirement and you're a homeowner and you're looking at your 401k, hey, what's wrong with this? What do you mean you guys don't think the economy is in good shape? I get it. You're kind of in a bubble right now. And God bless you. You've lived the American dream. You've had that success. You've, done things the right way, saved some money, put it away, let the stock market do its thing over the last 30, 40 years, and you're in a good place. And I love that for you. But there are millions, tens of millions of Americans who are raising families who are not feeling that way. And that's where, there were opportunities last night for Joe Biden to at least be empathetic about it. And he really couldn't do it. He had a chance to do it, but he couldn't do it. Instead, he basically said, don't believe your lying eyes. The economy's good. Just take my word for it. And poll after poll after poll shows no matter how many times he says it, the American people aren't buying it. Because frankly, you're smarter than him. 913-408-7957. Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business, is going to be here just after 8 to react to this unemployment report. And also, I got to get his thoughts on what we heard last night. here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, and of course on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Coming up, I do have to get to this as well. Speaking of the economy and homes, did you hear about the new plan for the president to try to make houses cheaper for you, the home buyer? I don't want to say this, but I genuinely can't think of a worse idea. We'll share it next.
If I were smart, I'd go home now.
Should have done it there, Joe. Good morning. It is great to be here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Last night, State of the Union 2024 in an election year was an absolute doozy. And there were, a lot of ideas that came out of last night, a lot of yelling and screaming. I started off the show saying I've got a 5-year-old, a soon-to-be 3-year-old, and a 5-day-old now. If I wanted to get screamed at, I don't need to turn on the TV to do it. But I did last night because, duty called. I'll be putting in the hazard pay later today. But one of the ideas that came out from last night from the president was one that I appreciate him trying to tackle this issue, but this is arguably one of the dumbest ways to go about doing it. The president proposing new $5,000 tax credits for first-time middle-class home buyers. Here's part of what he said last night.
But I'm not waiting. I want to provide an annual tax credit that will give Americans $400 a month for the next 2 years as mortgage rates come down, to put toward their mortgages when they buy their first home or trade up for a little more space. Just for 2 years.
All right, let's be clear. This is a tax credit. This is not Joe Biden saying here's $5,000 for a down payment. But as the Washington Post wrote here about this yesterday, President Biden is proposing a set of new housing initiatives during the State of the Union, including tax credits to offset high mortgage rates for first-time home buyers and encouraging people to move out of starter homes to put them on the market. The idea is to free up a part of the market that is effectively frozen as thousands of homeowners cling to low mortgage rates of 2 or 3% and avoid buying a new home with a much higher rate. So their idea is to have a tax credit. Can you think of a dumber idea to solve the housing crunch? What we have right now is a basic supply and demand issue. Boomers don't want to sell their homes. I mean, where are they going to go? They've got their homes paid off. Many of them do. Where are they going to go right now, right? So they're like, I've got a fixed housing cost. I got a paid off home. Why am I going to leave this situation? Even if the home's a little big, it's not ideal. What are they going to do? Millennials want to buy, right? They want to get out there. They want to get into the housing market. Developers only want to build apartments because of their labor and parts costs. And you have local municipalities like here in Johnson County who will give those developers credits to build apartments that nobody wants. And the answer from the goober in charge is to come up with a tax credit? The best option is to figure out how to unleash the free market with less unnecessary government programs, driving down the cost of business, higher labor participation, and increasing the workforce. And if you want to incentivize anything, if you want to talk about tax credits for anybody, incentivize developers to build homes. I don't love that idea. I'd rather the market do its thing. But if you want to talk about tax credits, get these developers to get out there and start building single-family homes, which is what the demand is for. Instead, they build apartment complexes because they claim there's a demand for it. The only reason there's a demand for it is because people can't get themselves in the homes right now. They're priced out because the cost of housing continues to go up and interest rates are so high. So suddenly they're like, well, I guess I'll rent for now because what else am I going to do? Where else am I going to go? I literally can't afford to buy a home. But you think a $5,000 tax credit is going to do anything to solve the housing crunch that this country is currently experiencing? Or how about this? Here's another idea. How about doing something about institutional operations buying single-family homes, the BlackRocks of the world, buying single-family homes and competing against everyday American families. You know, Joe always talks about fighting for the little guy. He always talks about, my kitchen table, blah, 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 as he kind of fumbles his way around. Why not do something about the BlackRocks buying up neighborhoods and turning single-family neighborhoods into rental neighborhoods? Why not do something about that? I think that could be bipartisan. Get the BlackRocks out of the single-family housing market. And there's a bunch of ways you could do it. You could outright ban it if you wanted to. But you've got BlackRock competing with you, the listener right now, for your next home in Liberty, in Overland Park, and in Lee's Summit. Think about that. You have institutional operations throwing cash down on homes, competing with you for a house that you want to raise your family in. I'm really not someone who wants to see the government get more involved in anything, but find me something that's inherently less American than that. And I know you'll get my friends at like the libertarian think tank, the Show Me Institute, who will say that that's great and the free market has to do everything on its own. And normally I'm a free market guy. But that is so out of whack because of what single-family homes were intended to be. They were intended to be an asset, for most people their largest asset, to raise a family and build community. And everything that these institutions are doing are anti-community and anti-family building. And the only people who would be proponents of that would be those who don't want to see strong families, strong neighborhoods, and strong communities, and people looking out for each other, people looking out for their neighbors, knowing their neighbors. They don't want that. They don't want an America that looks like that. You will own nothing and you will like it. That is the America that they want to create. And they're effectively doing it, by the way. And if you think the answer here is a $5,000 tax credit for first-time buyers or people selling their starter homes, how do you even define what is a starter home? Starter home in Kansas City looks a lot different than it does in Los Angeles. What's your definition of that? Just a made-up addition to the tax code that'll be good for accountants and good for attorneys and good for people who know how to game the system and will do very little for the average American who is getting squeezed right now.